Hey, I'm going to build a guitar designed for playing surf rock, and in a series of videos I'm going to document the process. I have no guitar making experience and I don't have access to a wood shop, so this is all going to be just me figuring it out, winging it, and making use of what I have on hand, which is mostly hand tools, some handheld power tools, and stuff like that. So this guitar is actually something I've been dreaming about building for, believe it or not, 18 years. And finally I said to myself, at some point it's got to stop being something that I'm planning on doing sometime next year, year after year after year, and just finally just start doing it. So here's the story of how I came up with the design and the story of my first aborted attempt at building this thing. At some point as a teenager I got really excited about surf rock. I loved Dick Dale and all the classic early 60s groups. I loved the Shadowy Men on a Shadowy Planet, which I was exposed to through watching Kids in the Hall as a kid. And I loved Man or Astro Man as well. I loved listening to it all, I loved playing it. By 2005, I'd had my own surf rock band for a few years. At that point, my main guitar was still just a Squier Bullet Strat, which was my first electric guitar. I had a couple other cheapos as well, but none of them were even suitable for tremolo picking. So I was dreaming of something cool and surfy that would stand out and fit my style of playing. I really liked the look of Mosrites and Japanese guitars from the 60s. And then there's nothing surfier than the Fender Jaguar, which debuted at the peak of surf mania in the early 60s. They'd taken the Jazzmaster's late 50s angular shape and, taking nods from the hot rod culture of the time, added a whole bunch of chrome control plates to it. Very cool, but very much out of reach. 2005 was way before they started reissuing these guitars as affordable Squiers. I was young and still trying to figure out how to pay rent next month, so there was no way I could afford a Jaguar, a Jazzmaster, a Mosrite, or anything of that sort. So believing in my own resourcefulness, I decided I want to design my own guitar. But how does one design a guitar? I didn't know. But it always stuck in my head from a Kurt Cobain biography I'd read as a kid, the bit where he cut up Polaroids of Jaguar and Mustang guitars, combined them and refined the shape to design his own signature guitar, the Jagstang. So that's how I started the process. I took a picture of a Jaguar and mixed in elements from a Jazzmaster, changed and refined the body curves, working in inspiration from other 60s guitars that I loved, and added what I felt was my own unique design to the horns. My upper horn design is supposed to evoke the shape of a wave, which I figured was super fitting for a surf guitar. A few months later, in early 2006, a big storm hit Santa Cruz, which is where I was living at the time. My girlfriend and I rode our bikes out to the beach, which was just absolutely littered in driftwood, and we filled up our basket of everything we thought we could use. I figured what better material to make a surf guitar than driftwood. I didn't know anything about tone woods or wood hardness or anything like that. I still don't even know what type of wood I was using. But for one single piece, I saw the entire body and neck. I'd read somewhere online that you'd get the best tone and sustain if the neck and body were one piece. I don't know if that's actually true, but I was young and impressionable enough at the time that I put in the effort to make that happen. I did it pretty much all with a coping saw, which I think was the only tool I bought for this project. Whenever I had free time, I'd go out onto the porch and spend an hour or two sawing with that coping saw. It took a ridiculously long time. The piece of wood I had was almost perfect. I could take the offcut from next to the neck and use that to extend the body to the perfect proportion. My headstock ended up being a tiny bit short, actually, but I figured I'd figure out later how to graft wood onto it and extend it. I shaped the back of the neck and rounded over the edges of the body with a pocket knife. And then I had a guitar-shaped piece of wood, but I had no idea how to continue. I hadn't thought about the neck angle, but it was clear that something would need to change to get strings at the right height. I didn't know anything about routing, let alone have a router. I didn't know anything about how to make a fretboard. I was totally stuck in over my head. So the project ground to a halt, and the guitar-shaped piece of wood sat in my closet for years and years and years. And in the back of my head, it was always something I'd get around to continuing eventually. Then years turned into almost decades, and it never happened. But then last year, I saw the Toneman DIY Kit Challenge, which is an annual competition they hold on YouTube for people to make guitars out of the Harley Benton kits that they sell. And I got to thinking, if I started from a kit, it wouldn't be so complicated to simply modify it into my surf guitar design. So I started playing around with the image of the Harley Benton Jazzmaster kit and worked out what kinds of modifications I would need to do to get a close enough approximation to my design. I figured out that I would need to graft on some pieces of wood at the horns and onto the headstock, but other than that, it would be pretty close just from the get-go. I planned that the next time I made an order from Thomann, I was going to add this kit guitar onto my order and make this project finally happen. But when the time came, that specific kit was sold out indefinitely. I ended up grabbing a different kit, the Telecaster kit, because I wanted to at least have something to participate in the Thomann DIY Kit Challenge. And at that point, I was playing around with a number of other designs as well. But when that kit arrived and I saw how disappointing the quality was, I thought again about using their Jazzmaster kit as the basis for my surf guitar build. But I wasn't going to quit. I decided I'd just be better off building from scratch and using better quality components from the start. Well, not entirely from scratch. I ordered a cheap maple neck with a paddle headstock. I'd be able to fit my quirky headstock design without needing to graft on wood, so already that made things simpler. And besides the body and the neck, a guitar is made up of a ton of ready-made components, and in batches everything gradually arrived until I had ordered everything I would need. I used my Reverb bucks to order a bunch of components from Reverb.com, including Vintera 50s Strat pickups, Jaguar control plates, and a number of other things. Thanks to everybody who'd used my Reverb referral link throughout the years, I was able to grab these things for free. My referral earnings went to good use. I tend to be pathologically thrifty, so I don't know if I would have splurged on such nice components if they weren't free. Knowing myself, I would have tried to make the most out of the cheapest option and scavenging materials from other things. I did feel a little silly after I'd bought the chrome thumb rest. If every little $12 component, that adds up very quickly. I could have fabricated one out of wood for free. However, that chrome thumb rest will look unique and nice. I decided I'd be basing the build off my latest design mock-up, since it was more detailed and consistent than my original 2005 mock-up. It slipped my mind that I'd compromise a little on the body curves in order to fit the Harley Benton kit shape, which I could have fixed now that I was no longer using the kit for the basis of my build, but I forgot. It's not a big deal. I think the design still looks very cool, even though it's a little bit less my own in that regard. So at this point I think we should discuss what considerations it takes to make a guitar good for surf music. First, the body. There's been a lot of effort to debunk the idea that the type of wood or body design makes any significant tonal difference. So I'm just going to accept that for now. Surf is played standing up, so it doesn't matter if the guitar body has an offset waist. It's purely aesthetic. Surf was always played on solid body guitars, particularly Fenders. So would a hollow body sound wrong? I actually don't know. There are usually other reasons, like the type of pickups, that make hollow bodies non-ideal for surf. The Shadowy Men on a Shadowy Planet, while technically not a surf rock band, do get great surfy tones out of their hollow body guitars. Anyways, a solid body with a bolt-on maple neck is both the traditional surf guitar and the easiest to manufacture, so that's what I'm going with. On various guitars I've played through the years, I'd get annoyed that I couldn't fret the chords up high on the neck. It's not uncommon for surf songs to include the A minor up on the 17th fret. So I made sure with my design that the lower cutaway was deep and wide enough that I can get my hand way up there. Scale length. Strat and Jazzmasters are 25.5 inches, Jaguars are 24 inches. That's quite a difference in extremes, and both have been used successfully for surf. So I'm going to say scale length doesn't really matter. For shorter scale lengths, you'll want thicker strings in order to maintain the comparable string tension. For my project, I'm going with 25.5. Strings. In the early 60s, when surf rock came about, the only strings people could get were heavy gauge flatwound strings. While those aren't typical today, that style of string heavily influenced both the playing style and sound of surf rock. With heavy strings, you have a lot more dynamic range, and they're stiff, both of which are essential to the surf style tremolo picking. You can hit the string with a mixture of soft and really dig in with hard accents without the string flopping around in unpredictable ways or affecting the pitch. In my experience, anything below a set of 12s is going to feel too spongy. I'm going to start out with flatwound 13s tuned to standard E tuning. Some guitarists play with heavier strings, but then they usually tune down. With a proper setup, the heavy strings aren't any harder to play than light strings. The only thing you can't do are massive bends, but I'm not much of a bender in the first place. Pickups. For surf, they must be single coils. And it's not just about the brightness, it's also because single coil pickup is sensing just one position on the string, giving it a pure, articulate, focused, punchy clarity, whereas a humbucker, you have more of a smeared and almost cone-filtered sound. Not even every type of single coil is suitable either. For example, P90s like were used for that dull, thuddy Elvis rockabilly sound aren't really open enough for surf, in my opinion. Or for an extreme example, listen to the Ventures live in Japan, or pretty much anything by Man or Astroman. The super hot Moserites that they used have an aggressive, fuzzy mid-range sound, which is super cool in its own right, but tone-wise it's the opposite of the dripping wet, clean Southern California surf sound. Jaguar pickups are fairly similar in construction to the Strat pickups, while Jazzmaster pickups featured a much wider coil to try to get more low end, and some describe the high end as ice picky. All three of these types of Fender pickups were used for surf, as well as for spaghetti western, and really it all depends on what kind of surf sound you want. For me, the holy grail of surf tone is Dick Dale's Miserloo. I don't think anybody has ever totally matched that magical drippy sound. Dick Dale was left-handed, and because he originally learned to play guitar playing a right-handed guitar upside down, he strung the strings on his famous lefty 1959 Stratocaster upside down. Ordinarily, a Stratocaster's bridge position pickup is slanted, such that the higher strings are brighter. Because Dick Dale's was strung opposite, the higher strings have more body while it's the low strings that have the emphasized bright twang. So to recreate that as closely as possible without having to relearn how to play guitar chords upside down, I'm set on having a 50s Strat pickup in the bridge position with a reverse slant on it. As for the rest, I like the idea of giving myself a wider palette to choose from rather than just having three more or less identical pickups. But the 50s pickups I already got came in a set of 3, so I may as well just go with that for now. I also have some low impedance Dan Electro lipstick pickups that I can try out for a slightly different kind of jangly twang. It would be nice to have just one hotter pickup like a Moserite pickup for the tonal variety, but I think I'll put off playing with different pickups until everything else is done and I've had some time to play with the guitar a bit and get a feel for what I might like or want differently. Whammy. Despite whammy being such a definitive aspect of the surf music sound, the king of the surf guitar, Dick Dale, never used one himself. He had a solid block of wood installed in his Strat to totally lock the bridge in a fixed position. I, on the other hand, can't play a guitar without a whammy. It's such an integral dimension to how I play the instrument. The Stratocaster's trem design is quite clever and powerful. The strings have a 90-degree break angle and terminate in a giant block of metal that rocks inside the body. Having the strings mounted in a solid mass like that ensures fantastic sustain. However, there are a couple issues with the Strat trem design. For one, the position where the whammy bar screws in is entirely in the way, blocking you from palm muting the high strings. Palm muting is another crucial dimension to the surf rock style that ideally should not be limited at all like that. Also, unlike other whammy designs where the string slides over the bridge or even just rocks the bridge itself, on the Strat the break angle changes whenever you whammy. And if you know anything about metal, you know that if you bend it back and forth enough times it fatigues until it breaks. And I was constantly breaking strings right at that point on my Strat, so the Strat trem system was not something I was entertaining for this build. I've always loved Gretsch guitars and those Bigsby vibratos they have, so when I first designed my guitar in 2005, trying out a Bigsby seemed very attractive. Now I've had a couple guitars since then with Bigsbys and have no complaints. Some other whammy designs may have a more surfy look to them, but they all cost at least 3 times as much as the cheapest Bigsby clone I could find, so that's what I'm sticking with for now. I got one with an extra long spring to compensate for the heavy strings I'm planning on using. Headstock. Paul Bigsby came up with the innovative 6-in-line headstock design that Leo Fender stole. It facilitates all the tuning machines being directly in line with the nut, unlike the traditional 3x3 headstock, like on a Gibson, where the strings get splayed out to the sides. The problem is that the strings don't continue in a straight line, and they are more likely to slip and snag when using the whammy, causing the strings to not be able to return to being in tune. So if you're using a whammy, that's something to keep in mind. However, I foolishly wanted a cartoonish 3x3 headstock on my design, so I'll likely be paying for that with tuning instability. There are solutions like the String Butler. I may end up needing to get one of those, or try to build something similar from scratch to solve the inevitable nut friction issue. Reverb. The spring is magical. You see, when combined with the attack thud from the heavy flat-wound strings coming through those precise and clear single-coil pickups, the spring does something really incredible. It emphasizes the transient. So in that way, it does the opposite of what any other kind of reverb, especially digital reverbs, in that instead of making the sound more distant and atmospheric, it actually thickens it up and makes it more present with that characteristic splash sound. The holy grail of reverb is the Fender Reverb unit. It's big and bulky, has tubes, and does just this one thing to your sound. However, Surfy Bear makes a new solid-state version that sounds acceptably close. String height. So on a Strat, the strings are really low to the pickguard, and whenever I play one of those, I'm constantly hitting the pickguard with my pick while tremolo picking. Basically, it's in the way. It's wasted energy. So I'm thinking I'd prefer the strings further from the body, like on an archtop guitar. Thumb rest. So the way I tremolo pick, I like to anchor my palm or pinky somewhere. It gives me a static point of reference that helps me with accuracy. When I'm playing the low strings, I can anchor my pinky on the bridge. But when I'm playing the high strings, there's nothing to touch or grab onto. So I want to try borrowing this idea from bassists. There's clearly enough of them that have this issue that they have a specialty product for it. So my first step was, I printed out the template on paper, I checked the component placements and real-world measurements. I printed it a tiny bit too small, and the control plates, for instance, didn't line up. So I went back and fixed it, and after printing out a bigger version, decided to just go with a smaller version after all. It looks cooler to me, more nimble and aggressive. As for fitting the control plates and everything, I decided I'd just wing it and make it work. So here I am, ready to go. In the next video, I'll find some wood to make the body out of, and finally get started on this damn thing.